Okay, good evening. I think it's now recording. All right. With this video, I would like to introduce to you the other reading for this week after the one by Appadurai. And in particular, I would like to introduce to you this essay by a great contemporary political theorist, Sila benhabib or benhabib. Depends how you choose to pronounce the name. As I believe I mentioned in the other presentation, she's originally from Turkey, which explains, as a matter of fact, the many references to Turkey that you're going to find in this text, but she has been active in the USA in the past decades, all right? And as I said, Sheila benhabib is probably one of the most important political theorists of our time. Sorry, I stopped the recording for a second as I'm afraid there wasn't enough light. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you how you find this test. You just Google it. You just Google benhabib strange multiplicities, and it is in a website called Digital Commons, and so you just find it. It is also indicated on the syllabus how to find it. So here it is, and instead of preparing a PowerPoint, as this is a text that is very, very rich in, references and quotes, I thought it can be much better if I just take you, let's say, step by step through it. Allora, first of all, I think it is important what this test is about. And I'm using this essay to introduce, in particular, the topic of political identities in globalization. We have been speaking about politics, I would say basically all the time, and we have been also discussing a great deal about identity politics. But let me tell you, so far, we have been discussing in this course of identity politics within the borders of a given state. More specifically, essentially what we have been doing, we have been discussing political identity within the borders not only of states, but actually of democratic states, all right? So this is the point made by Taylor about recognition. This is also, the point of Iris Marion Young about, invisible form of oppressions. We have been discussing about, women and what is the real liberation, what is, different kind of feminism and how they see women freedom, women liberty, and what's the best way to realize women liberty, blah, 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 okay? But here, in this essay in particular, I would like to, not in this essay, in this essay, Sheila benhabib is actually talking about political identities actually when it comes to the construction of states, of nations, of countries, all right? So let's say this is the difference of what we have been doing so far. The point of departure and the reason why this essay is called Strange Multiplicities is because it moves from, how can I say, realizing how strange are the times that we live in. Now, as you can see, this is not a new essay. This is an essay that dates back to 1997. But somehow, I would say the most important political processes that this essay debates are still pretty much, how can I say, urgent and relevant today. I would like to begin by one example. That's me, that's not benhabib, so please don't put it in the final. Why is our time so strange? Because we all say that we live in a globalized world, all right? This is what we are talking about, isn't it? And if you remember, right at the beginning when I introduced also the concept, the notion of globalization, the very, very first thing that, I mention is that somehow globalization changes the way that we relate to our territory. Is it making sense? And also, one of the direct consequences of globalization is also the fact that states sometimes find themselves in a complicated position. And why? Because somehow globalization is the result of processes that by their very nature cannot be stopped by borders. Think, for example, of global financial economy, the finance-scape that Appadura is talking about. Evidently, the great flows of financial wealth cannot be stopped at a border. And also think of, environmental issues. Climate change is not stopped by one border. So this is why in the past week we have seen how the world is becoming, Bauman uses the metaphor of liquid. Why? Because it's more fluid. Also, we have seen in Appadurai how people's imagination changes in globalization, because, people may think in a certain way that doesn't correspond to the place they actually are. All right? Okay, and all of it is true. So we can say that somehow globalization makes it so that people are forced to mix together. All right? And this is definitely true. But actually, on the other hand, there is another phase of what globalization is doing to identity. And to a certain extent, we have already started to talk about it when we were having a look at Zygmunt Bauman. Because if you remember, Zygmunt Bauman is speaking of winners and losers of globalization. Some people that are becoming very cosmopolitan, and instead some people that are forced to remain more and more local. So somehow we are already familiar with the idea that globalization may also present a contradictory phase. Globalization is not only opening up, world politics is not only opening up spaces, but may also bring about phenomena of re-entrenchment. Okay, Sheila benhabib continues along this line, because this is in fact, the strange multiplicity of our time. And here I am coming to my example. I remember, when I was a child and we were, still at the time of the Cold War, etc., etc. I remember that more or less, the opening parade of the Olympic Games would last, like an hour, 45 minutes, all right? Because, for example, I remember there would be, a given amount of countries. And in particular, there would be one big country, Soviet Union, and this big country would all parade under one flag. Now, the opening parade of the Olympic Games lasts much longer. And why? For a very simple reason, because we have many, many more states than we used to before 1989. So I'm saying this thing somehow to prepare you to the reading of this essay, because one of the strange consequences of, this strange time that we live in is in fact a proliferation of states, and also a very interesting phenomenon that is that many states have been originated from secessions. Think, for example, of Soviet Union. Soviet Union used to gather under the same name many different ethnicities, languages, etc., etc. Today, there are many, many states that have emerged from Soviet Union, because, there is the Russian Union, then you have Ukraine, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and so on and so forth, Georgia, so many, many states. Also, you will see that, for example, in this essay, benhabib will make a lot of references even to former Yugoslavia. Until more or less 1990 existed the state Yugoslavia, and today Yugoslavia has been replaced by Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo. And probably I'm forgetting someone. I hope not. Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro. Oh, Macedonia. So, why? Why there is this kind of trend to secession in this world? Actually, Sheila benhabib, in this essay, essentially she means to explore this kind of, new identity claims by adopting a very specific angle of observation. And the angle of observation that she adopts will be the opposition between essentialist views of identity and constructivist views of identity. Essentialist views of identity somehow should be a term that is familiar to you, because we have been speaking of essentialism when we were discussing about feminism of difference. So essentialist identities are all those identities that somehow believe, claim a common essence, that is something that exists, a commonality that exists. This is why sometimes in this essay you can find words such as ontology or metaphysics. Because, for example, if I say Italianness, I am making a kind of, essentialist claim, because I am claiming that Italianness exists, somehow, as I would say, God exists, all right? Now, let me take 2 minutes to say instead what constructivism means. A constructivist approach to identity means that instead collective identities are the result of political processes that happen throughout history. So that to a certain extent, identities are not natural, but they are constructed in view of some specific kinds of political project. So that somehow identities are not natural, but that identities are a project that you can construct. Okay? So this is just, a little bit of introduction, and I shall be back very soon for a second presentation. I'll be back.